The night sky over Earth had always been a familiar sight, silent, filled with distant stars that sparkled like jewels against the void. Humanity had often gazed up at the heavens, dreaming of the unknown, but never imagining that they were anything more than a speck in the grand cosmos. Then, everything changed. It began as a blip on radar, a tiny anomaly that was quickly dismissed as a malfunction. But within hours, it became clear this was no technical glitch. Satellite images showed a massive object hurtling toward Earth at an unimaginable speed. As panic spread across the globe, governments scrambled to respond. Were they under attack? Was this the beginning of a new era of warfare? The object grew larger and larger, its shape becoming clearer, vast, dark, and sleek, like an enormous blade slicing through the atmosphere. It entered Earth's orbit, but it didn't burn up upon re-entry. Instead, it slowed, gliding gracefully toward the surface. A series of massive thrusters activated, and with eerie silence, the ship hovered over the ground, its shadow falling across a deserted field in the middle of nowhere. It was alien, and it was undeniable. At first, there was nothing but silence. The world held its breath. Was this the moment of first contact, or the first blow in a galactic war? Then, the ship's surface shimmered, and an energy field erupted outward, casting an ethereal glow across the surrounding landscape. The ground shook as a gentle hum emanated from the ship, resonating deep in the bones of anyone nearby. The atmosphere itself seemed to vibrate with energy. It was as though reality itself was bending. The first humans to approach the ship were met with an overwhelming sense of awe and fear. Military personnel, scientists, and government officials stood together, unsure whether they should act or wait. Just when it seemed like the ship might stay silent forever, a low rumble echoed, and a mechanical voice, perfectly clear in every language, boomed through loudspeakers installed on the ship's exterior. "We are the Tsilanar," the voice announced. "We come in peace." The message reverberated across the globe, as every communication system on Earth was hijacked. The Tsilanar had invaded the airwaves, but there was no sense of malice, only a cold, calculated calm. Their words were like ice, their tone a mix of curiosity and command. The message was broadcasted in every language on Earth, as if the ship already understood humanity's greatest obstacle: communication. "We offer a gift to your species, one that will elevate you beyond your current limitations. Join us, and we shall guide you into the stars." The message paused, and then a single line pierced through the air, heavy with implication. "Accept or perish." The world held its collective breath. For days, there was uncertainty. Debate raged across governments, the media, and the streets. Was this an offer of salvation or a veiled threat? Could Earth truly trust these strangers who claimed to hold the keys to humanity's future? In secret, world leaders convened, deciding whether to reject the offer or capitulate to a force far beyond their understanding. But then, humanity's greatest asset was revealed: its incredible adaptability. A group of scientists, aided by linguists and mathematicians, worked day and night, deciphering the Tsilanar's strange, melodic language. Within days, they cracked the code. They realized that Tsilanar's message wasn't just an offer. It was an invitation to learn, to advance, to become something more. But the more they deciphered, the more troubling it became. The Tsilanar's understanding of elevation was not just about technology. It was about control. They hadn't simply come to offer knowledge. They were offering an alliance of convenience, expecting humanity to submit, to become a cog in their greater galactic machine. But the Tsilanar had miscalculated something fundamental: the human spirit. As the world processed the message, it became clear that humanity's response would not be simple submission. The Tsilanar, for all their power and advanced knowledge, had underestimated the strength of the human will. People from every corner of the Earth stood united in a singular resolve. Whether they feared or welcomed the alien presence, they shared a common conviction: no one would dictate the future of humanity. And then, In a moment that would change the course of history, the humans responded. In a broadcast to the world, the voice of Earth's leader, President Elena Mitchell, rang out, "We hear your offer, Silnar, and we will decide our own destiny. We do not need your control. We will rise on our own terms." As she finished her speech, the Earth's response was clear. Humanity would not be a passive participant in this cosmic play. They would rise to meet the challenge. The Silnar, stunned by this defiance, had no idea what they had just set into motion. They had come expecting a primitive species eager to submit. Instead, they had awakened a force that would change the galaxy forever. And humanity, once considered the most primitive of species, had just taken its first step onto the stage of the stars. The Silnar, once confident in their superiority, watched in stunned silence as Earth's defiance rang across the cosmos. They had underestimated humanity's spirit and intelligence, but now they had no choice but to follow through with their offer. The decision had been made. The next step in their plan was set in motion. The Silnar ship began to hum with life once again, its surface rippling with energy. As the hours passed, the ship deployed vast arrays of sleek, metallic devices, machines that shimmered with unknown technology and pulsated with an eerie, otherworldly glow. These were not weapons of war. No, the Silnar were offering something much more dangerous: knowledge. Tools that could revolutionize Earth's infrastructure, cure diseases, and harness the power of stars themselves. The first of these devices was a massive crystalline structure erected in the heart of the United Nations headquarters. It pulsed with energy, and soon it became clear. It wasn't just a physical object. It was a conduit for information. In an instant, millions of lines of data flooded into human minds, streaming through neural networks faster than anyone could comprehend. Humans had never seen technology like this before. Instant access to knowledge of unimaginable depth. The secrets of faster-than-light travel, zero-point energy, and matter manipulation were now at humanity's fingertips. At first, the gifts seemed too good to refuse. Scientists and engineers were drawn to the technology like moths to a flame. Within weeks, breakthroughs that had once seemed impossible became reality. Human cities were restructured to harness clean energy. Once impossible diseases were cured, and food scarcity became a thing of the past. Entire industries were transformed overnight. And yet, as the world rejoiced in its newfound prosperity, something darker began to emerge. Not all humans embraced the Silnar's gifts with open arms. A growing faction of Earth's population, who had initially spoken out against the alien presence, became even more vocal. They were called the Earthborn, and they believed humanity had made a grave mistake. What the Silnar had given them was not just technology, it was a leash. The Earthborn saw a future where the Silnar would control every aspect of human life, their subtle manipulation woven into every device, every machine, every piece of technology. The Earthborn were not alone in their fears, as others began to question the true nature of the Silnar's peaceful intentions. Tensions began to rise. While many celebrated the advancements, others saw only the strings that tied humanity to the Silnar. Secret meetings were held, plans were formed, and an underground resistance began to grow. They began to gather evidence that the Silnar's gifts weren't merely intended to help humanity. They were meant to subdue them, to make them dependent. Earth had been given the keys to the stars, but in return, they were expected to bow to the whims of a higher power. As whispers of rebellion spread, the Silnar remained eerily silent. It was as though they were watching, waiting for humanity to decide whether they would be docile subjects or break free from their influence. The first real sign that Earth's dependency on the Silnar could backfire came when a powerful group of humans, led by the Earthborn, hacked into the Silnar's data network. What they discovered was beyond their worst fears. Hidden within the advanced technology were hidden control mechanisms, subtle codes designed to keep humanity in check. The Silnar had built-in fail-safes, backups, and access points that would allow them to dominate human society whenever they chose. This was not the benevolent offering it had appeared to be. It was a method of quiet control. In a moment of desperation, the Earthborn decided to act. They launched a covert operation to disable the alien network, to break the chains that bound humanity. It was a risky move, one that could have led to their downfall, but they knew that if they didn't act, Earth would never truly be free. They began using Earth's own advanced technology to create an encryption program so powerful that even the Tsilonar wouldn't be able to control it. In parallel, a more dangerous plan began to form. Using the data acquired from the Tsilinar's machines, a faction of engineers and physicists, led by Dr. Lucas Carroll, discovered a way to weaponize the alien tech. They realized that the same energy systems powering the Tsilinar's gifts could be used to create an immense devastating force. But such power came at a cost. It could destroy entire cities if not carefully controlled. And so, Earth stood on the precipice of a new world. The gifts of the Tsilinar were not just tools. They were the key to humanity's survival or their downfall. Would they embrace the power and rise alongside their alien benefactors, or would they reject it and risk everything to stand on their own? The answer would soon become clear. As the world prepared for an impending clash of ideologies, the Tsilinar's presence on Earth remained a constant reminder of humanity's uncertain future. And as tensions built, the countdown to a decision that could change the galaxy forever began. Would humanity be subjugated by the alien gifts, or would they defy the odds and prove that even the most primitive species could become masters of their own fate? As the world began to pulse with the power of the Tsilinar's gifts, the cracks in humanity's unity deepened. The Tsilinar had hoped to unite Earth under their banner, to usher in an era of intergalactic cooperation. Instead, they had sparked a fierce ideological divide. On one side, the majority of Earth's population reveled in the newfound prosperity. Cities were rebuilt, diseases were eradicated, and human technology leaped forward at a pace never before seen. The promise of peace, stability, and limitless growth was tantalizing. But on the other side, a growing faction of humans, now known as the Earthborn, began to see the Tsilinar's gifts for what they truly were: chains, gilded but no less restraining. They argued that humanity had been given the keys to the universe only to be bound to the Tsilinar's will. The Earthborn believed that the Tsilinar had not come to help Earth but to control it. And in their quiet manipulation, they had already begun to bend humanity to their desires. The Earthborn's resistance wasn't only about rejecting alien technology, it was about reclaiming freedom. They sought to expose the Tsilinar's hidden agenda, to dismantle the intricate systems of control embedded within the gifts. They worked in the shadows, recruiting scientists, engineers, and military leaders who shared their distrust. The underground resistance spread like wildfire, fueled by fear of what Earth might become if the Tsilinar were allowed to continue their influence unchecked. In the heart of the resistance was Dr. Lucas Carroll, a physicist whose team had discovered the hidden control mechanisms within the Tsilinar's tech. He had once believed that the Tsilinar's gifts were the key to Earth's evolution, but as he delved deeper into their systems, he began to see a darker side. The encryption codes, once thought to be harmless, had a secondary function. They could be used to remotely track and control humans through their neural interfaces, slowly subduing their will without their knowledge. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. Earth had been given power, yes, but at a cost: their autonomy. Dr. Carroll's team worked tirelessly, creating a virus that could infiltrate the Tsilinar's network and destroy the control system embedded within the technology. But this wasn't just a matter of hacking into a database. The Tsilinar's technology was embedded into the very fabric of Earth's infrastructure, from the energy grids to the AI systems running cities. To destroy the control mechanisms meant shutting down a significant portion of Earth's technological advancement. It was a gamble, one that could plunge the planet into chaos. The Earthborn didn't shy away from the risks. In secret meetings, they debated the moral implications of their actions. Some were willing to make the sacrifice, believing that the future of humanity was worth the cost. Others were hesitant, fearing that their war with the Tsilanar might lead to a greater catastrophe. As tensions grew, the Resistance's plan evolved. A full-scale cyber attack to shut down the Tsilanar's control systems, but in a way that would leave humanity's technological infrastructure intact. It was a delicate balance, one that could tear the planet apart or offer them the freedom they so desperately sought. Meanwhile, the Tsilanar were not oblivious to the growing unrest. They had been watching from the shadows, calculating the exact moment to intervene. Their message to Earth was clear. They had given humanity the gift of power, and now it was time for humanity to accept its place in the galactic order. The Tsilanar issued an ultimatum. Earth would submit to their leadership or face dire consequences. If humanity refused to comply, they would consider it an act of rebellion, a threat to the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build. But humanity, once considered a primitive species, was not easily cowed. The Tsilanar's words, meant to intimidate, only strengthened the resolve of the Earthborn. Dr. Carroll, alongside a select group of his colleagues, finalized their virus. The countdown to their attack began. Then, in a twist of fate, the Tsilanar made a critical mistake. In an attempt to maintain control, they shut down large portions of Earth's network in an effort to keep humanity from advancing too quickly. But this move, intended to weaken the resistance, only backfired. The temporary blackouts provided the Earthborn with a window of opportunity. In a daring operation, the Earthborn infiltrated the central hub of the Tsilanar's communications network, the heart of their technological infrastructure. It was a race against time. Every second counted. The Resistance's agents, working in the shadows, deployed the virus that would wipe the control systems clean. A pulse of data, swift and silent, spread across the Tsilanar network, cutting off their control over Earth's systems. The virus wasn't just a weapon. It was a declaration of independence. As the final line of code executed, Earth's systems began to come alive in a new way. Without the Tsilanar's hidden commands, the technology they had once handed over to humanity now functioned on its own, free from any outside influence. The Tsilanar had underestimated the resilience and cunning of humanity. In their haste to control, they had unknowingly empowered their enemies. The world watched in awe as news spread of the Earthborn success. The Tsilanar, despite their immense technological superiority, were forced into a defensive position. They had failed to subdue humanity. Earth was free, not just from their technology, but from their manipulation. However, as the Tsilanar retreated into the depths of space, their presence loomed larger than ever. The Earthborn had won this battle, but they knew the war was far from over. With the Tsilanar now aware of humanity's resilience, the fight for Earth's sovereignty had only just begun. Just as humanity began to breathe a sigh of relief, believing they had turned a corner in their struggle for autonomy, a new, far more menacing presence appeared on the galactic stage. The Tsilanar, though they had failed to subdue Earth, were not the only power in the universe with a vested interest in the planet. And soon, the galaxy's most brutal and feared warlords made their intentions clear. Without warning, a fleet of warships, black as coal and gleaming with malevolent energy, descended upon Earth's orbit. These ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, bulbous, monstrous vessels that appeared as though they were built for destruction, not exploration. The ship's dark silhouettes cast ominous shadows over the planet as they hung in the sky like vultures. The Korath had arrived. The Korath were a ruthless, war-hungry alien species with a history of conquering and annihilating weaker civilizations. Their reputation as merciless conquerors stretched across the galaxy, and now they had come to Earth. It was clear from the very beginning that they were not here to negotiate, to offer gifts, or to discuss peaceful coexistence. They had come for one reason: to dominate. The Korath's leader, a towering figure named Raxtar, broadcasted a message across all communication channels, demanding Earth's immediate surrender. His voice crackled with the authority of centuries of conquest, and his words were sharp, filled with the promise of devastation. "We are the Koreth." Raxtar's voice boomed. "You have defied the Tsilanar. A foolish mistake. Now you will face the wrath of a real power. Surrender now, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be erased. You are nothing but ants in our path." Earth had barely begun to recover from the tension of the Tsilanar's control, and now they were thrust into a new crisis. Panic spread like wildfire as military leaders scrambled to understand the threat. Unlike the Tsilanar, who had come in peace, the Koreth were a species bred for war. Earth's newly acquired technology, which had been a source of hope and power, seemed suddenly inadequate against this new, ferocious enemy. The Tsilanar's advanced weaponry had been used against them to liberate Earth, but now, even with those gifts, the full scale of the Koreth threat was far beyond anything humanity had encountered. The world's leaders convened in a desperate, hastily arranged summit to decide how to respond. Could Earth survive this new wave of aggression? What could they do against an enemy who had crushed entire worlds under the weight of their might? Even with the power they had gained from the Tsilanar, it seemed unlikely that Earth could stand against such a massive invasion. But humanity was not one to simply surrender. The spirit of defiance that had burned so brightly during their struggle with the Tsilanar was alive once again. The Earthborn, though still considered radicals by many, rose to prominence as the leaders of the resistance. They had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering knowledge of the Koreth's tactics and weapons, hoping against hope that they might never have to use it. In an underground military facility, Dr. Lucas Carroll, now a figure of immense importance, worked feverishly with his team of engineers and soldiers to turn the tide. Using the reverse-engineered Tsilanar technology, they built new, more powerful weapons, energy shields, gravity manipulation devices, and weapons that could harness the very force of a planet's core. But even these would not be enough to match the raw power of the Koreth warships. The Koreth's technology was brutal, designed for destruction rather than progress. The Earthborn knew that their only chance was to outsmart the invaders, to use Earth's terrain, ingenuity, and sheer will to create an advantage. The first clash between Earth's forces and the Koreth was nothing short of catastrophic. The Koreth ships unleashed hell from above, their weapons obliterating entire cities in a matter of hours. Earth's defense forces retaliated, but the difference in scale and firepower was apparent. The energy shields flickered and cracked under the barrage of Koreth fire, and humanity's forces were pushed back, retreating into underground bunkers and hidden military bases. But in the midst of the chaos, a surprising turn of events occurred. The Tsilanar, watching from the shadows, made their presence known once again. For the first time, they offered their help, though it came with a price. "We were wrong to withhold our aid." The Tsilanar's voice echoed across Earth's communication channels. "The Koreth must not be allowed to claim your world. We will assist you in repelling them. However, in return, you must agree to join us in the Galactic Alliance." It was a tempting offer. Earth, battered and on the brink of collapse, knew they needed all the help they could get. But there was a catch. Joining the Tsilanar's alliance would mean giving up the very freedom they had fought so hard to reclaim. The Earthborn, still distrustful of the Tsilanar, refused to be swayed. The battle for Earth's future had become not just a fight against the Koreth, but a war for the soul of humanity. Would Earth remain free, or would it fall under the control of another galactic power? As the Koreth pressed forward, humanity stood at a crossroads. They could accept the Tsilanar's help and survive, but at what cost? Or they could fight on their own, risking everything in a battle against overwhelming odds. The decision would come soon, but one thing was certain. Earth's survival was no longer guaranteed. The fight for the future had just begun. The Earth trembled beneath the weight of the Koreth's onslaught. Cities lay in ruin, and the once unified human population was splintering under the pressure of the invasion. Military forces scrambled to hold what little ground they could, while civilians huddled in shelters, praying for a miracle. The Koreth fleet, relentless and merciless, seemed unbeatable. Their warships tore through Earth's defenses as though they were made of paper, and their ground forces, the Korath foot soldiers, were a terrifying blend of brutality and precision. Yet even as humanity reeled from the devastation, hope flickered in the darkest corners of the world. The Xilinar, once seen as conquerors in their own right, had once again offered their aid. But this time, the offer was not a simple gift. It was a complicated, high-stakes gamble. Earth, already in the grips of a brutal invasion, now faced the terrifying prospect of losing its independence for the sake of survival. At the heart of the resistance, Dr. Lucas Carroll stood before a large holographic map of Earth, his face etched with exhaustion. He had spent days working alongside Earthborn commanders, engineering new weapons and refining strategies, but with each passing hour, it became clearer that Earth was being overwhelmed. The Korath were too powerful, their tactics too precise. Humanity was losing the battle, and time was running out. The message from the Xilinar still echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the choice ahead. "We will assist you in repelling the Korath," they had promised. "But you must agree to join our alliance, submit to our guidance, and we will ensure your survival." For some, it seemed like the only option left. Earth's military leaders debated fiercely over the offer, some arguing that their only chance of survival was to accept the Xilnar's help, no matter the cost. They were prepared to trade freedom for protection, if it meant saving their people. After all, the Xilnar had the knowledge, the power, and the technology to turn the tide of the war. Their ships could match the Korath fleet, and their weapons could obliterate the enemy's forces. Survival was the top priority. Everything else could be dealt with later. But Dr. Carroll, along with the Earthborn leaders, knew that the price of such survival was too high. The Xilnar's offer wasn't simply about winning the war. It was about securing Earth's place under their thumb. To join the Xilnar's Galactic alliance would mean surrendering humanity's freedom, their autonomy, and perhaps even their identity. The very essence of what made humans unique, their ability to defy, to resist, and to chart their own course, would be lost. The Xilnar's offer was not a partnership. It was a subtle form of enslavement, with Earth's survival guaranteed at the cost of its sovereignty. The decision weighed heavily on Dr. Carroll, who had seen firsthand the horrors that awaited a civilization that submitted to the will of an alien empire. He turned to the Earthborn, the underground resistance that had fought tirelessly to free Earth from the Xilnar's subtle control. They were resolute in their conviction. They had fought for this moment, the chance to stand on their own 2 feet. They would not let the Xilinar, or the Korath, decide their fate. As the Korath continued to advance, it became clear that humanity could not afford to stand by and wait. Time was running out. The Earthborn and their allies worked around the clock, finalizing their preparations for a desperate counteroffensive. They had a weapon, a new kind of technology that, if successful, could shift the balance of power. It was a creation born from both the Xilnar's technology and Earth's own ingenuity. The Earthborn had discovered how to harness the energy signature of the Korath ships and reverse it, creating a devastating shockwave that could disable the warship's power systems. The plan was risky. If it failed, the consequences would be catastrophic, but it was their only chance. Dr. Carroll stood at the helm of the operation, his heart pounding as he watched the clock tick down. The Korath were drawing closer, their warships hanging like vultures in the sky, waiting for the moment to strike. Earth's last line of defense had already been breached in several regions, and humanity's forces were scattered, desperate. With a final, determined breath, Dr. Carroll activated the device. A pulse of energy shot into the sky, colliding with the Korath fleet. For a moment, everything was still. Then the first warship faltered, then another, and another. The energy shockwave had worked. It had scrambled their systems, disabling their ship's engines and weapons. The Korath fleet, once invincible, was thrown into disarray. The tide of the war had turned. But the victory was far from complete. The Korath were not a species to surrender easily. Raxtar, their warlord, would never allow defeat to be an option. In his fury, he commanded his forces to fight on, but the sudden loss of their most powerful ships left them vulnerable. With the advantage now in their hands, Earth's resistance launched a full-scale assault. The Korath, though still formidable, were no longer the overwhelming force they had once been. Humanity, against all odds, was winning. As the battle raged on, Dr. Carroll looked up at the sky, where the final remnants of the Korath fleet were falling into chaos. Earth had survived the invasion, but the war was far from over. The Xilinar, still lingering in the shadows, had shown they were willing to offer help. But at what price? The choice between survival and freedom remained, and humanity would have to make it soon. Would they accept the Xelinar's offer to protect them, or would they fight to maintain the very freedom that had allowed them to survive this far? As the smoke of the battle cleared, the question remained: what kind of future would Earth choose? The battle had been won, but the war for Earth's soul had only just begun. The remnants of the Korath fleet limped away from Earth's atmosphere, their once terrifying warships now crippled and scattered across the vast expanse of space. Humanity had managed to strike a powerful blow, catching the Korath off guard with their unexpected technological ingenuity. The Earthborn and their allies celebrated the victory, but they knew the cost had been steep. Countless lives had been lost, cities reduced to rubble, and the scars of the invasion would last for generations. Yet, in the quiet aftermath of the battle, the question that had loomed over the resistance since the Xelinar's first appearance became more urgent than ever. What next? The Xilinar were still present, still offering their help, still demanding Earth's submission. While the Korath were reeling from defeat, the Xilinar had made it clear that their patience was running thin. Their message was one of both caution and opportunity: join the Galactic Alliance or face the consequences. Dr. Lucas Carroll stood in the midst of the wreckage, his mind heavy with the weight of the decision that would soon define humanity's future. He had seen the best and worst of both the Xilinar and the Korath. The Xilinar were not outright tyrants, but their subtle manipulations, their desire to control, had almost enslaved humanity. The Korath, on the other hand, were pure destruction, an existential threat to anyone who opposed them. Freedom or security, Dr. Carroll murmured, the words barely audible in the chaos around him. He wasn't alone in his thoughts. The Earthborn, a faction that had once been dismissed as radicals, had now become the champions of Earth's autonomy. Their leader, an unyielding woman named Kira Valen, stood beside him, her arms crossed as she surveyed the horizon. She was a soldier at heart, her loyalty to Earth unshakable, and she had become the voice of those who refused to kneel to any power, be it the Xilinar or the Korath. "We've proven that we can stand against them," Kira said, her voice firm and resolute. "But we can't keep fighting on our own forever. If we refuse the Xelinar's help, we risk everything." Dr. Carroll shook his head. "We already risk everything. But accepting the Xelinar's terms means giving up our future. If we allow them to control us, we'll never truly be free again." Kira turned to face him, her expression fierce. "Then what do we do? Do we keep fighting the galaxy's superpowers until there's nothing left of us? Do we send a message that we'll never accept help from anyone, no matter how desperate we get? Because that's the road we're on." Dr. Carroll was silent for a long moment. He understood her concerns. The Earthborn weren't naive. They knew the harsh realities of war. And they knew that standing against the Xilinar, especially in their weakened state, might be a suicidal choice. Earth was still recovering from the Korath invasion, and the resources to build a defense capable of standing against the galactic giants were limited. The alliance that Xilinar offered was tempting, providing both the technological infrastructure to rebuild and the military might to deter any further invasions. But the idea of submitting to another alien empire, no matter how benevolent they seemed, was a thought Dr. Carroll couldn't accept. Humanity had fought for too long to be free to simply turn over their destiny to an outside power. What would that mean for future generations? Would they grow up in a galaxy where they were subservient, their independence stripped away? No, the choice was clear. Earth had to remain free, no matter the cost. As Dr. Carroll and Kira debated the future, the Silinar made their presence felt once again. A massive diplomatic vessel, more majestic than anything that Silinar had previously revealed, appeared in orbit. Its surface glimmered with intricate designs, and its energy signature radiated with both beauty and menace. The Silnar's message arrived almost immediately. "We have been patient," their envoy said, their voice calm yet carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "You have shown resilience, and we admire your tenacity. But know this, Earth, you are not ready to face the galactic stage alone. Your kind has much potential, but you are a fledgling species, still trapped in your primitive ways. Join us, and we will protect you, guide you. Your future is in our hands." Kira clenched her fists. I knew it. This is their true face. Control wrapped in promises of protection. Dr. Carroll, though wary, stood firm. "We've survived without their help before, and we'll survive again. We won't surrender." A final silence fell between the Earthborn leaders. The Silinar were powerful, yes, but Earth was a world that had defied the odds since the beginning. Humanity had survived plagues, war, and isolation for millennia. What was one more challenge? The galaxy may have seen them as weak, but the Silinar and the Korath had underestimated Earth's greatest strength, its people. "We'll take the fight to them," Kira said, determination burning in her eyes. "We'll show them that we don't need their protection. We don't need anyone's permission to stand tall." And so, with that declaration, the Earthborn rallied. The remnants of Earth's military forces, bolstered by the knowledge gained from their victory over the Korath, began to prepare for the next stage of the war. The Silinar were still lurking, their power and influence casting a long shadow, but Earth would no longer be a pawn in their game. It was time to fight for their future, and to prove to the galaxy that humanity was not ready to be enslaved. In the cold depths of space, the Silinar waited, their hands poised to strike, or perhaps to offer one last ultimatum. The stage was set for a final confrontation, one that would determine if Earth could stand alone, or if they would once again fall under the yoke of an alien empire. The future of humanity hung in the balance, and Dr. Carroll, along with Kira Valen and the Earthborn, were prepared to defend it at any cost. The atmosphere on Earth was one of quiet determination, the calm before the storm. Earth's forces had rallied, uniting under the banner of their newly formed alliance of resistance groups, including the Earthborn, military remnants, and other factions who had once been at odds with one another. The Korath were still licking their wounds, and the Silinar were hovering on the edge, waiting for the moment to strike, or to offer yet another proposition. But the longer Earth resisted, the more it became clear that the Silinar had underestimated the resolve of humankind. They had expected submission, fear, and eventual surrender, but humanity had answered with defiance and strength, proving to the universe that they were not a species to be easily manipulated. The choice was now simple. Either Earth would find a way to stand on its own, or it would become a tool in a galactic power play. Dr. Lucas Carroll stood in a dimly lit war room, his eyes scanning a large tactical map, his mind racing with possibilities. The Silinar had given Earth one last chance to join their alliance. Their envoys had been polite but firm, promising security, technology, and a future among the stars if Earth would only accept their offer. But Dr. Carroll's thoughts remained unwavering. They had fought for freedom, and they would die to preserve it. The Silinar believe they can manipulate us, Kira Valen said, her voice steady as she paced back and forth, her boots clicking against the concrete floor. "They've underestimated us. Now we must prove them wrong." Dr. Carroll nodded. "They've already shown their cards, Kira. We know what they want. Control. We can't give them that. Not for anything." The Earthborn had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Despite the initial desperation they felt when the Korath invaded, the tide had turned. The shockwave weapon they had used to cripple the Korath fleet was only one part of a much larger technological breakthrough. Combining reverse-engineered Silinar tech with their own innovations, Earth had built weapons capable of disrupting the communications and propulsion systems of enemy fleets. The war was no longer about brute force. It was about intelligence, cunning, and the ability to strike when least expected. Now, with Earth's resistance forces scattered but unified in purpose, a daring plan was taking shape, a plan to turn the tables on the Silinar and show them that humanity would not bend, no matter the odds. The mission was simple, but dangerous. Infiltrate the Silinar flagship, disable its command systems, and deliver a message to the galactic powers that Earth was not to be cowed. Dr. Carol, Kira, and a select group of elite operatives were preparing to board a newly modified stealth vessel, the Vanguard, capable of evading even the most advanced detection systems. It was humanity's last, best chance to make a definitive statement to the Silinar and the galaxy. They had to show that Earth was willing to go to any lengths to preserve its independence, even if it meant standing alone in the cold void of space. "We won't just fight for survival anymore," Kira said, her voice sharp and filled with resolve. "We'll make them fear us." Dr. Carroll's gaze was cold as he studied the mission briefing. "We won't just show them that we're capable of surviving, Kira. We'll show them that we can win, no matter the cost. This isn't about just beating them now. This is about winning the future. It's about ensuring that Earth and humanity have the right to chart their own destiny." The mission would take them deep into Silinar territory, far beyond Earth's current reach. The Vanguard was the most advanced stealth craft Earth had ever built, and it would allow them to get as close as possible to the Silinar flagship without detection. The plan was audacious, risky, and fraught with peril. They would infiltrate the heart of the Silinar fleet, disable their command systems, and broadcast a message to every ship, every world, and every faction watching. Earth would never bow. Hours later, the Vanguard lifted off from the surface of Earth, a sleek black ship cutting through the sky and into the void. As it ascended, Dr. Carroll felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him. It wasn't just about the people aboard the ship. It was about humanity's future. Everything hinged on this one operation. As the Vanguard glided through space, Kira Valen stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the view outside. The dark expanse of the galaxy stretched before her, filled with possibilities and dangers. Earth's survival no longer depended on weapons or technology alone. It depended on the resolve of its people. The Silinar had seen humans as insignificant, as a primitive species, but they were about to learn that Earth's strength was in its people, its spirit. That was something no empire, no matter how advanced, could ever crush. Meanwhile, in the Silinar flagship, Raxtar paced back and forth, watching the footage of the Earthborn Resistance's victories over his forces. His anger was palpable. The Korath's defeat had been a blow to his ambitions, but it was Earth's unrelenting defiance that truly frustrated him. The humans were proving to be an unexpected thorn in his side, and he would not allow them to continue to disrupt his plans for the galaxy. "They are persistent," Raxtar muttered to his subordinates. "But they will learn that the Silinar always get what they want." He pressed a button on his console, sending a message to the outer reaches of space. "Prepare for the final push. Earth will submit, or it will burn." As the Vanguard neared the Silinar flagship, the team braced for impact. The tension was thick in the air. This was the moment of reckoning. There would be no retreat, no second chances. Earth had made its stand. Now it was time to fight for the future. The countdown to the next phase had begun, and as the Vanguard descended toward the heart of Silinar-controlled space, Earth's last gambit was about to unfold. The Vanguard moved silently through the cold void of space, its dark hull blending seamlessly with the starry expanse. Inside, tension hung in the air like a thick fog, each breath taken by the crew a measured rhythm in the vast emptiness. Dr. Lucas Carroll stood beside Kira Valen, his gaze fixed on the distant silhouette of the Silinar flagship. Massive, imposing, and seemingly impenetrable. It loomed ahead, its presence a reminder of the stakes. "We're almost there," Kira said, her voice a low murmur, but there was a steel in it that gave Dr. Carroll pause. She had always been a warrior, a leader, but now she seemed like something more, a symbol of everything humanity had fought for. Dr. Carroll nodded. He didn't need words to express what they both felt. The mission was their last chance. If they succeeded, Earth would carve its place in the galaxy, free and unyielding. If they failed, the Xilinar would crush them, and humanity would be left to crawl under their thumb, a conquered species. The Vanguard's cloaking systems kept them hidden from the Xilinar sensors, but Dr. Carroll knew that it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. The flagship's defenses were sophisticated, and that Xilinar would not let an intrusion go unnoticed. Still, they had no choice. They had to push forward. As the ship approached the flagship's massive docking bay, Dr. Carroll gave Kira one last look. "Let's do this." With that, the Vanguard slid into position, its docking clamps engaging with the outer hull of the Xilinar vessel. Inside, the crew prepared for the most dangerous phase of the operation. They would breach the flagship, infiltrate the central command center, and disable its systems. A small team of Earthborn operatives, trained in stealth and combat, would be sent to plant explosives and hack into the Xilnar's command infrastructure. The rest of the crew would maintain the ship's cloaking field and ensure the ship's escape once the mission was complete. Kira and Dr. Carroll led the charge, moving swiftly through the corridors of the Xilinar ship. The halls were vast, the architecture alien, and the oppressive silence of the enemy vessel hung in the air. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every sound amplified by the stillness. But the Earthborn were undeterred. They had fought for freedom all their lives, and nothing would stop them now. They'd reached the command center with little resistance. The Xilinar were organized, efficient, but they hadn't anticipated humans who were willing to sacrifice everything for their independence. A few quick, calculated moves neutralized the guards, and the team breached the central core of the flagship's operations. The room was massive, bathed in the eerie glow of Xilinar technology. Holographic screens flickered with data, and the hum of alien machinery filled the air. At the far end of the room stood the command interface, a massive console that controlled the entire ship. Kira moved with purpose, her eyes sharp as she scanned the layout. "We plant the charges here, here, and here," she said, indicating key points on the console. "Then we overload the systems. No escape for them." Dr. Carroll glanced at the console, feeling the surge of determination. This was it. They would make their stand here, in the heart of the Xilnar's power. The message would go out to every corner of the galaxy. Earth would never kneel. As the team worked to plant the charges, Dr. Carroll hacked into the ship's systems. His fingers danced across the console, bypassing layers of encryption with ease. Years of working on Earth's most advanced projects had prepared him for this moment. He knew what needed to be done. As he connected to the communication network, he broadcasted a message to every ship in the vicinity. "This is Dr. Lucas Carroll of Earth. You've underestimated us, Xilnar. We are not your slaves. We will not bow to any empire. Earth is free, and we will fight, no matter the cost. Let this message echo across the stars." The moment the message was sent, explosions rocked the ship. The charges detonated with a force that rattled the very core of the flagship. The ship's lights flickered, and the hum of its systems grew erratic. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to contain the chaos. But it was too late. The heart of their command had been destroyed, and the Xilinar flagship was on the verge of collapse. As the Vanguard's crew prepared to escape, Kira activated the final phase of the plan. A transmission that would send Earth's message to every major galactic network, a declaration of independence that would resonate across the universe. No longer would Earth be seen as a primitive world ripe for conquest. No longer would they be dismissed as weak. The message would be loud, clear, and undeniable. Humanity was ready to stand on its own. With the Vanguard in motion, and the Silinar flagship disintegrating behind them. Dr. Carol and Kara shared a moment of quiet relief. They had done it. Earth had made its stand. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The Silinar flagship had been disabled, and the broadcast had reached every corner of the galaxy. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of 1,000 years of humanity's struggles. Earth was not an empire to be controlled. Earth would never bow to another power. The fight for freedom, for independence, had been won. The galaxy would never be the same. The Silinar might still seek to control, and the Korath might still look for vengeance, but Earth had proven one irrefutable truth. Humanity was no longer a primitive species. It had become a superpower in its own right, one that would forge its own destiny. As the vanguard made its way back toward Earth, Dr. Carroll allowed himself a rare moment of hope. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Earth's future belonged to Earth. The dawn of a new era had begun.